We are here with friend of the chamber, Poppy Arford. Hi, Poppy. How are you?
Hello, good morning, Cory.
Good. Thanks for joining me. I know how busy you've been. So just so everyone, if this is the first time you're watching one of these videos, what we do is we go over 5 questions with each candidate. They're the same 5 questions. We like to do that to keep it fair to everybody, but we often go off on tangents, depending on answers and that sort of thing. It'll be about 15 to 18 minutes or so, and it's a great way to find out about the candidates. So with that, Poppy, your first question, what district are you running for and where does that cover?
So on the ballot, the district that I will be running for is State House District 101.
Mhm.
The district I'm still currently serving in is District 49, and some people have been confused about that. So all you need to know is that we went through a redistricting effort nationwide. It's all hinged to the 10-year census numbers, and using those numbers, the entire state of Maine, all the elected districts were redistricted, and they changed the numbers, as a matter of fact, when they do that. So 49 changed and it became 101. So I now want me to give me a little description of how it changed.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome.
Okay. It actually became a lot simpler. And I'm going to read you. I actually wrote out the description because
Perfect.
last time we did this 2 years ago, I got all bumbled on the description. So I wrote
Well,
it
it
out.
was a very bumbleable district before. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it is. It is. So
Yeah.
anyhow, I'm going to give you the boundary line between District 101 and the district it abuts to in Brunswick, which is District 100. So it starts at Gundalow Gap Road on Mere Point. It runs up Mere Point Road to Main Street, continues up Main Street to McKeen Street, takes a left-hand turn onto McKeen Street, goes down McKeen Street to Stanwood,
Yep.
takes a right-hand turn at Stanwood, goes across Pleasant Street, and hits the river.
Okay.
That's the boundary line. That's it. It's pretty much that simple.
Okay.
That's everything to the immediate right of that boundary line is District 100.
Yeah.
Everything to the left of that boundary line is District 101, and it goes all the way west to actually from that, using that boundary line,
Mhm.
you just then run up the Brunswick Topsom town boundary, which is
Yeah.
also the Muskegon River for a while. And then you hit Durham, you
Yeah.
run down Durham, southward down the boundary line, Brunswick and Durham, till you hit Freeport. And then you follow the Freeport boundary line till you hit the ocean. And
Awesome.
so basically that line I just gave you, it's everything to the west of that constitutes Brunswick.
Yeah, and that's the key. Is it's still within Brunswick?
Oh, yeah,
And
and
everything's within Brunswick. It's just the one community, and it's that western.
Exactly. And unfortunately, I have lost though the whole downtown. I haven't. It's the district.
Right.
But the whole downtown area that was part of, including the mall and the businesses and Water Street, that was part of 49 is now part of 100.
Yeah. But that's what happens with the census. That's what happens with population shifts.
Yeah.
And as everyone can attest to, we've got more people living here than we did before. We've got a higher percentage of the population. That's what it's all based on, is population. So,
Right. And by the way, District 101 gained a wonderful residential neighborhood that was not there before. That is sort of between the junior high school and Main Street.
Okay.
That
Yep.
residential area in there was a carve out.
Yeah. Awesome.
Again, when they redistrict, they have to meet certain guidelines. Each district has to have between 8,000 and 9,000 registered voters in it.
Yeah.
So you have to stay within those parameters. So there you have it.
Well, there we go. Well, thank you for that clarification, my friend. Yeah, it is confusing. You have one of the. It's better than it used to be, but it's still one of the audit, like the Bath district. I can't remember which one that is, but what number it is. But yeah, it's just Bath, and it's like, oh, that's easy. It's just Bath. Anyway, tell us question number 2. Tell us a bit about your background and why you're running for office.
Well, I'd like to start out by saying, and this is kind of cliche, but it's true for me. I have lived in Brunswick for over 35 years with my husband, Lauren, raised a family here. My children graduated from Brunswick High School. I love living in this, being part of and living in this community.
Yeah.
So that's where I start to tell folks about myself. I've been here for a while. I love it here, and I intend to stay here probably until I'm, until whenever, but I love this community. And I've had the good fortune of being able to serve on a number of groups. I've served on numerous school committees while my children were going through the school system. I've also served 2 terms on the Brunswick Town Council. And now I have the good fortune of being an appointed member of the Recycling and Sustainability Committee, which includes participation on a subcommittee of that group, the Energy Subcommittee. So it's just a very interesting place to be serving here locally. I also have a very diverse work resume, including starting out when I was much younger as an Outward Bound instructor, one of my first passion jobs. I loved it. And then moving on to completing college, becoming a licensed substance abuse counselor, and then doing that for a few years and realizing that I wanted to be more involved in outdoor in a career that would allow me to spend more time outdoors. And I actually got involved in waste management and recycling. And I started my own small recycling called Greenfields Consulting Service. And then I went on to be the founder and director of the Share Center program for over 10 years. And that was a program that we took reusable and recyclable materials out of all the local businesses and made them available to the educators regionally. And that program is still going. It's based in Auburn and it's still going. So that's a good thing.
Great thing. My gosh.
Over the last 12 years, I also had the good fortune of being able to serve as a patient and affordable healthcare advocate in many, many different aspects of the improvement efforts in the healthcare industry in our state.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of this question is also the why question, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so it starts out with my commitment to affordable healthcare. And after this 10 to 12 years of service within that area, I realized that it really would take a legislative solution to really make any significant changes in the healthcare industry in our state to make it to structure it in a different way so it was truly affordable for everybody. And that's what initially brought me to the legislature in 2020. And it remains a primary reason for my desire to serve a second term. However, as you can imagine, during the 2 years that I've served, a number of other critically important issues and policies I've become aware of. And so this time around, yes, healthcare is still there, but there's other things too. And those other things are housing. And I don't want to answer.
let me say, Jeff, that was a great answer. A couple of
In
things.
terms of housing, I think at this point, many people are aware of that we have a critically, we have a chronic housing shortage statewide. And here in our community, it's gotten to the point where it's handicapping our businesses, especially our smaller businesses. We are also, another thing that I'm extremely concerned about is people at the level of the housing market that they actually have no home. And these are people who are experiencing homelessness. And I'm very concerned about what's happening with that population, especially currently as we head into the cold weather months. But there's a number of issues, and I'm just going to read them off because I actually thought a lot about this. And of course, inflation is at the top of the list still for so many people, and our workforce and public safety on our roadways. We've had a huge uptick in fatalities on our roadways. Expanding property tax relief is still, and it will remain critically important. Clean energy, access to clean energy, and protecting our environment. These are all issues that are not only important to me. In talking with many people in my district, I've learned that they're also very important to my constituents.
I'm going to stop you there just for 1 second. I do want to say, one thing I meant to say off the top, just for everyone, just for transparency's sake, is that Poppy and I are friends. Poppy's a member of our chamber. I think it's really important that I always outline, and I would hate for someone to see a video and be like, hey, wait a second, don't you guys know each other? Yes, we do. And one of the reasons Poppy and I know each other is because we work together on policy issues. The other thing I wanted to highlight is part of your first answer where you said, why do you do this? And you said, because you love your community. And I think that is such a wonderful place to start everything from, is this saying that you love the community. I pause you just for a second because I want to make sure everyone knows that it's fair. The third question is actually what are the top 3 issues affecting Mainers right now, and they look forward to working on if elected. And I know we're talking about some of those issues right now. So with that being said, let's go back to some of the things that you're focusing on, Poppy. And thanks for letting me interrupt.
So yeah, the lack of affordable housing is because healthcare is always going to be something that I feel like I don't make promises because who knows if I can't control so many of the outcomes. I can just do my very best to influence them and to work really hard to follow through on what I say I'm going to do. So, but affordable healthcare for everybody, that's a big, big, big task. And so I'm just going to continue to work on that probably for as long as I can. But lack of affordable housing is a current emergency.
Yep.
And as you know, Cory, because you're right in the thick of this, our businesses here in Brunswick are suffering. Teachers, I have heard at least half a dozen stories about teachers that were ready to come to Brunswick and work here and were not able to take the job because they could not find affordable housing. Well, I shouldn't say affordable, I should say housing. Right. There's just no housing. And then it's also not affordable. So, and it's the same thing in healthcare. People want to come and be nurses at Midcoast Hospital. Traveling nurses are extremely expensive.
Yeah.
If Midcoast Hospital cannot find enough, I'm just using nurses as an example, but it's widespread within the industry. If they cannot find enough nurses to staff the hospital, then they have to, one of the places they can go is to traveling nurses, and they're very expensive. So of course, it's the industry, the healthcare industry in our community is going to thrive and do much better if people can live and work here. And they're simply right now, that's a huge, big problem. And it's widespread within every industry. Daycare is also an industry that is taking a huge hit for a number of reasons, but absolutely one of those is a lack of affordable housing for people who want to work and live locally and take care of young people. So, so the housing issue is incredibly important. And what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to start by continuing to, we have a housing caucus that was started last year in the legislature, and it just 2 weeks ago, it started to meet again. And it's a group of legislators who really are committed to this, to working together on bills and legislative solutions. And I have already started to participate in that group. I'm absolutely committed to it. And through participation in this group at this point, people can submit legislation, bills to be considered in the next session up until what's called the cloture date. The cloture date will be sometime in December. Yep. So we have between now and then to submit bills related to addressing the affordable housing and the housing crisis. And
I did not know about the housing caucus. That is wonderful to hear. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to your first point too, where you said you're passionate about healthcare. That's why you got into it, because you knew you had gotten to a point where there has to be a legislative solution. And that's a key point here is we can do so much locally and try to work on some of these things, but sometimes we just need a bigger gate to get open, and the state legislature can be those gatekeepers to open up some different avenues and some things that we might not have looked at. And so again, this is exactly the way to start attacking a lot of these problems, is to fix it on a broad level, so that each individual community doesn't have to solve it on their own if the state legislators can work together and come together with some solutions that can work in a bunch of different communities.
And one more thing about the top issue being an adequate housing supply that includes affordable housing for everybody who wants to live and work in Brunswick. Is this whole issue, is it okay if I keep going?
Oh, please, please, please,
The
no,
whole
absolutely.
issue of inflation, even though I don't think a state like Maine, we certainly can't fix inflation, but what we can do, we can influence it in the
Mhm.
right direction. And we can certainly do everything possible to help people who are experiencing the real downside of what we're going through right now as a country. And things like, I'm very concerned about people being the rising cost of everyday essentials, including food, transportation, heat and utilities, the basics that people need just to function. And we really, as a community, need to work together here in Brunswick and the Mid-Coast area, as well as myself as a legislator, taking advantage of the ways in which I can influence solutions in Augusta.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to point out one of the things that we have here locally that is an amazing, excellent program is Tedford Housing's Warm Thy Neighbor Fuel Assistance Program, which is just going online November 1st. Just go on the Tedford Housing website. It's all there. I think you fill out an application over the phone, you call, and my understanding is the program it's well funded this year, and hopefully it's going to be able to help out the people who will not be able to afford to heat their homes without assistance like that.
Copy. It's such a great point, because there are things that are within our control and there are things that are not. Like, it's not within our control that the nations of OPEC decided to stop producing 1 million barrels a week or something,
Right.
3 months ago, and that has hurt the supply and demand and has raised costs. There's nothing that we can do about that in Maine, but if we can point people to funds and different solutions to help ease some of that pain, that's exactly what service should be all about.
So Cory, my third priority, and you're going to love this one, and I promise you, I'm not saying this to just put a smile on your face, although I hope it does, is really growing our workforce locally and statewide. And because I have had the opportunity to speak with you over the last 2 years through our intersection points, through the chamber, through Rotary, Brunswick Downtown Association, places where your presence is very much appreciated. And I've had opportunities to collaborate with you, but for instance, I just want to mention the program that you have done such a great job of filling me in on, which is the Career Exploration Internship Program, which I think you're about to launch, or is it already launched?
Just about to launch. So we're going to do it as a pilot program here in the first semester. We're going to target 20 to 30 students in the area, and then make sure that the program works and work on any issues that might arise. We don't expect any to arise, but if they do, we want to be able to fix it on a small scale first, and then the second semester really expand it.
Well, I think that's an example of the innovation and creativity that we need to put a dent in the deficit that we're currently experiencing in our workforce. It's clear everywhere you go that we just have not recovered from what we lost during the pandemic. Restaurants still cannot open to their full hours because they simply don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
Schools are still, my husband is a retired teacher who was invited to asked to substitute because there's such a deficit of teachers. And, we need to ramp this up. We need to find ways to do it. So thank you so much for this program.
Thank you.
I know there's other programs. I know there's other funding. And again, it's a priority of mine to do what I can as a legislator, influence the creation of more jobs, the funding of more jobs, and to work in collaboration with my local chamber, which I have the good fortune to be directed to Cory. I'm very excited about continuing whatever collaborations we can do if I have the good fortune of being elected.
Well, thank you, Poppy. Yeah, and so do I. And you also you come to our chamber events. You talk to the business owners themselves, and you hear it straight from them. It's the same things that I'm hearing. And you're right. It's going to be a solution that we're all going to need to pitch in on. But that work is starting, which is great. Question 4: if voters could only know 2 things about you before they fill out their ballot, what would those 2 things be?
So I could say anything here, right?
It's an intentionally vague question allowing you to go wherever you want to go.
On an essay test, this would be an open-ended question.
Exactly.
It's actually hard. I thought about this to narrow it down to two things, but really the first thing I want to say that I want people to know about me, because I haven't had an opportunity to speak with everybody in my district, is that it truly is an honor to represent you in the legislature. Sometimes, especially during the first year, the COVID year, when we were on Zoom 24/7, it was a struggle. It was very challenging. I am a people person. I don't honestly do well looking at little square heads on a Zoom screen day after day after day. But still, even when it was really, really tough, I had this profound sense of what a privilege it was. So I want to thank people for the support that they've given me and all the conversations that I have had with people that help me understand what my district needs and wants. And to also say that the other thing you need to know is that I truly am a hard worker. That's what I brought to this job with me. And because I had no experience working, I had no experience as a legislator, as a state legislator. And so for an example of when I say I've worked hard in this particular job, is that the roll call votes, which happen, everything goes through a committee, all the bills are in a committee. That's where they start out, and then they're voted on. And then if they're voted ought to pass, they go to the floor of the House and the Senate, and that's where the final votes take place. They pass there, then they go to the governor's desk. This is just basics. There's some.
Oh, no, but this is good. This is always good to go over.
So roll call votes are really the critical votes. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you as a legislator, put your beliefs and your constituents' needs and interests behind every piece of legislation that's voted on. And I earned a 100% voting record, which means I showed up for all 621 roll call votes. And I'm happy about that. And I intend to continue to be there and to show up. And that's just an example. I don't know how you're going to follow up on these interviews, but I actually have a link to the roll call votes that I can give you if you're going to be putting anything, online or anything.
Yeah. Well, so in the description of each video, we will have, I'm going to ask you your contact information in a second. We'll put that down there.
And people can use this link, even though it's a link to my roll call votes, you can very easily switch to another person. So people can look up anybody's roll call votes and how they vote.
And I think that's, it's one of those things that we think, when you vote for someone, you think that's what happens, but that's not nearly the case with all legislators. So that's such a great valid point. And yeah, I can't imagine, having your first session be over Zoom and being during a pandemic. That must have been very, very difficult.
For me, it was. I think for people who had children at home because some people, it is a part-time legislature in terms of the way that we are paid. Some people have the good fortune of being retired, but some people are still working full-time or part-time as legislators. So for some people, it was much more convenient. So I would say it was mixed, but for me, I desperately wanted to be with my peers. I desperately wanted to be with all the people that normally would come to the Capitol to lobby, to meet with me. It's one of the most enjoyable things about being a legislator is to have people come to Augusta to visit me. So this is an invitation to any constituent of District 101 who would like to come to Augusta themselves or with a group. Just contact me and we'll work it out. I would love to have you. And the best thing to come, of course, is January through the end of the session, because then you get to see what's happening.
Absolutely.
So, there's one more thing, and I
was going to ask you if there's anything else before we get to the last question. So that's perfect.
The other thing is how important it is to practice what is referred to as collaborative leadership. I actually was trained in this through the Hanley Health Leadership Development Program in 2013. And what that means is when I think about anything as a legislator, putting a bill together, being part of the housing caucus, how I'm going to establish a relationship with someone either in my own party or another party. I always think about it from a we perspective. How will we do this together? That's how I think. And for me, it works extremely well, to the point where I have to say, even though we have very, very distinct policy differences, oftentimes I'm a Democrat with someone who's a member of the Republican Party. That does not mean that we cannot be friends. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of people in the Republican Party that I have met over the last 2 years that I consider good friends. One of my Republican buddies even came and spent the night with me during that first year when we were having something was happening, and she lives way up on the crown of Maine.
Yeah.
And, so building relationships, collaborative relationships with all of my colleagues in the legislature has been extremely important to me. But we need to recognize, though, that we do have different policy perspectives. And the other part of collaboration is respect.
Yeah.
We must respect each other's positions. We don't have to like them. We don't have to want them to go forward, but we at least need to hear them out. And sometimes that's difficult for both for both sides of the conversation, but we must be willing to do that.
I completely agree. It's you never know where another legislator is coming from. And sometimes it might not be the legislator themselves that necessarily feels this way, but a bunch of their constituents do, and they're there to represent their constituents. So, I mean, you'd never know what the situation is until you sit down and you meet with somebody, you hear about their experience, you ask them what they're hearing. And often in there, you can find some sort of common ground. And if you can't, then you can't, but at least you understand a bit more where they're coming from, which is so important.
Right. A quick example is the Equal Rights Amendment, which we tried to pass again. This is sort of an annual, a session by session thing that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, it was like, why wouldn't we pass this at this point? In 2022,
Right.
Why are we not passing an Equal Rights Amendment to the Maine Constitution? And so I sat down with people and talked to them, and I learned some reasons why. And again, I don't have to agree with it, and I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I just need to be respectful in my response. And it was actually extremely helpful to gain a better understanding.
Well, and by building those relationships, you might not agree on this issue, but when the next issue comes up, this person is a lot more willing to work with you on that if you were collaborative and respectful the first time.
And bottom line is, we're always looking for that common ground, that little piece of the ground that we can stand on together and we can agree on. So I absolutely agree with you, Cory. That's the point of all this.
That's wonderful. All right, Poppy, as I know we went a little bit long, but that's okay. It was a great conversation. One last question for you. What's the best way for people to connect with you to find out more about you as a candidate?
So the best way actually is to call me. I give my phone number out to people. No one has abused that. And I actually prefer a text initially. If we don't, just send me a text, say, this is who you are, what would be a good time to call, or if you want me to call you, give me a good time to call you. So my phone number, do you want me to just write now?
Fire away.
It's Maine 207-522-1997. Again, that's 207-522-1997. And then of course, you can always email me at, I'm going to give you my campaign email address because we're talking.
I think that's probably, I know you have one for being a legislator.
Yeah.
Too,
Okay. And it's really, that one's easy to remember too. It's just Poppy, Poppy, the number 4. So Poppy 4, state rep @gmail.com.
Poppy 4 state rep @gmail.com. Beautiful.
And then I also have a web page, which is also very easy to remember because it's www.poppyforstaterep.com.
There we go. It's a .com. So So www.poppyforstaterep.com. poppyforstaterep.com, and we'll have those in the description of the video.
Yeah,
as
and my
well.
email, you can access my email through my website as well.
Yes, yes. And they will get you that way. Well, my friend, great seeing you as always. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me this morning, and we will chat soon.
Well, thank you so much, Cory, for providing the opportunity for us to talk with the people of Brunswick.
I'm happy to do it, Bobby. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.